right now, but it has to do with a fiscal policy, monetary policy, and foreign policy of way too much spending. But it took a lot of years for us to get here. The people in this country have been begging for a change in direction, and they haven't had it. It's time we gave it to them.
We've got a lot to get to on the economy. To begin with, let's go to Janet Hook of the LA Times.
Governor Romney, you've spent the last several days warning voters that John McCain, as president, would follow, quote, a liberal democratic course. But by most measures, doesn't he have a pretty mainstream conservative record?
I'm sure on many issues he does, and he's a good Republican. I wouldn't question those credentials at all. But there are a number of pieces of legislation where his views are out of the mainstream, at least in my view, of conservative Republican thought. So, for instance, he's opposed to drilling in ANWR, I believe. If I'm wrong, correct me, Senator. He voted twice against the Bush tax cuts. Only 2 Republicans did that. He is the co-author of McCain-Feingold, which I think took a whack at the First Amendment, and I do believe as well hurt our party pretty significantly, and I think has made money have an even greater influence in politics today, not less influence. He also was one of the co-authors of McCain-Kennedy. The first bill, by the way, not that bad. About 5 or 10% of the people, by our calculation, got a form of amnesty. Most people went home. Under the final version of McCain-Kennedy, everybody who was here illegally, other than those who committed crimes, was eligible to receive a Z visa for $3,000. They got to stay here for the rest of their life. That's not a Republican thought. And then now McCain-Lieberman, which is a unilateral, meaning U.S. only imposed cap-and-trade program, which puts a burden as much as 50 cents a gallon on gasoline in this country. It basically says Americans are going to pay for the cost of global warming, not the Chinese and Indians and so forth. So those views are outside the mainstream of Republican conservative thought, and I guess I'd also note that if you get endorsed by the New York Times, you're probably not a conservative.
Senator McCain?
Let me note that I was endorsed by your 2 hometown newspapers who know you best, including the very conservative Boston Herald,
I'd say the same
who know
thing.
you well better than anybody. So I'll guarantee you the Arizona Republic will be endorsing me, my friend. Let me just say I'm proud of my conservative record. It's one of reaching across the aisle to get things done for Americans, obviously, whether it be McCain-Lieberman that established the 9/11 Commission and then the legislation that implemented that, or whether it be working across the aisle in the Armed Services Committee to provide the men and women with what they need to defend this nation. And I'm proud of that record. And I heard Governor Romney describe his record. As I understand it, his record was that he raised taxes by $730 million. He called them fees. I'm sure the people that had to pay it, whether they called them bananas, he still had to pay $730 million extra. His job creation was the 3rd worst in the country as far as job creation is concerned. And as we all know, he has saddled the people of Massachusetts with a $245 million debt because of a big government-mandated health care system. And while the rest of the country was losing 7% of the manufacturing jobs while he was governor, 14% of the manufacturing jobs left the state of Massachusetts. So I am proud of my record, and I am proud of reaching across the aisle and getting things done. That's what the American people want us to do. And the legislation and the activities I've done, particularly in this America's defense, particularly in the fact that I've been involved in every major national security challenge this nation has faced. And by the way, I think it would be hard for people like Jack Kemp and Tom Ridge, former head of the Department of Homeland Security, and Phil Gramm, and all of the long list of conservatives that support me, both governors, conservative governors, and in fact, your former lieutenant governor who spent a lot of time on the campaign trail with us. But the point is that I'm proud of the people that have surrounded me and are supporting me, and whether they come from one part of the spectrum or the other, strong conservatives are ones who are supporting me, and I'm proud of their support. And I'll rely on people to judge me by the company that I keep.
Governor Romney?
Okay, I got a little work to do here. Let me help you with the facts here, Senator. First of all, my Lieutenant Governor, Kerry Healy, endorsed me and is supporting me and is working all over the state for me. My predecessor in office, Governor Swift is supporting you. When you say that our state ranked number 3 in job creation, the study you're relying upon is a study that included her term in office. And during her term in office, 141,000 jobs were lost. During my term in office, we added jobs. And from the lowest point, we added 60,000 new jobs. So that study, unfortunately, included the wrong data. With regards to fees, we raised fees $240 million, not $730 million. Facts are stubborn things. We audited our fee increase because, of course, we cared. Now, why did we raise fees $240 million? We had a $3 billion budget shortfall. We decided we were not going to raise taxes, and we found that some fees hadn't been raised in as many as 20 years. These were not broad-based fees for things like getting your driver's license or your license plate for your car, but instead something like the cost of a sign on the interstate and how much it was going to cost to publish a McDonald's or Burger King sign on the interstate. We went from like $200 a sign to $2,000 a sign to raise money for our state in a way that was consistent with what the market had done over the ensuing years. And let's see, with regards to my health care plan, you know, a lot of people talk about health care. I'm the only one that got the job done. I got health insurance for all our citizens. We had 460,000 people without insurance. We got 300,000 of them signed up for insurance now. I'm proud of what we accomplished. The bill that I submitted to the legislature didn't cost $1 more than what we were already spending. However, the legislature and now the new Democratic governor have added some bells and whistles, and they're willing to pay for them. I wouldn't do that if I were governor. I'd veto the items they put in place there, but they're entitled to make changes if they want to. They're still running a balanced budget. I wouldn't have added the money they did. And by the way, no debt was left. I left a rainy day fund of over $2 billion. Facts are stubborn things. I'm proud of my record.
Governor Huckabee, Rush Limbaugh says if you or Senator McCain were nominated, would be the nominee, you would, quote, destroy the Republican Party. Your reaction?
You know, I wish Rush loved me as much as I loved Rush. I think he's a great voice for conservatism. It doesn't mean he's inerrant or infallible. And on this, he's very wrong. And I want to make sure everybody understands this isn't a two-man race. There's another guy I would like to say down here on the far right of the stage. You want to talk conservative credentials? Let me get in on that. I created the first ever broad-based tax cuts in the 160-year history of my state when I became governor with a 90% Democrat legislature. I also balanced the budget every one of the 10.5 years. I'm the only person that's sitting here today that has consistently supported the Human Life Amendment that's been part of our Republican platform since 1980, and also supports the Marriage Amendment to our Constitution, two conservative hallmarks. I believe in less government. I believe in lower taxes, not higher. I think it's important to streamline the federal government like we streamlined some services in Arkansas. Simple things like getting a driver's car tag, because it used to take a couple of days and about 7 pieces of paper. We streamlined it so it could be done on the internet in 4.5 minutes. We consolidated state agencies. We cut 11% out of a budget. One of the things that Rush Limbaugh once praised me for was creating what I call the Tax Me More Fund. And the way that worked was that we had a lot of people in our legislature wanted us to raise taxes. And I said, we don't need to raise taxes. We need to cut our spending. And so I created a fund called the Tax Me More Fund. I said, there's nothing in the law that says that you can't just pay more if you want to. And I had envelopes printed. And I said, anybody who wants to pay more taxes, just fill it up with whatever will make you feel better and send it right in. And it proved that a whole lot of people didn't really want to pay more taxes after all, because after about 1.5 years, there was only about $1,200 in the account, 1,000 of which had been given by a liberal legislator. So if we're going to talk conservatism, I'd like to be in on the discussion.
Let's talk more about that. Jim VandeHei from Politico.
First question from the readers, Governor Romney's from Jonathan Rubin in Fairfax, Virginia. As governor of Massachusetts, as Senator McCain just pointed out, you raised hundreds of millions of dollars in additional revenue through so-called fees and loophole closings, and you passed a health care bill forcing individuals to buy insurance on the threat of a fine. How do you reconcile that policy with your claim to be the authentic conservative?
Well, let's talk about each. I mentioned fees, and I think it's appropriate if the state is providing a service to someone that's not a requirement to have a car or a driver's license, but instead, let's say we're going to be taking out a oil tank from your backyard because it's leaking into the ground, and the state's going to provide that service, that to charge a fee sufficient to do so makes a lot of sense. And so the fees ought to be adjusted from time to time to compose the amount of what the cost is of providing that service.